the deception of normality. The perception of normality is deadly in times when a dramatic collapse happens behind a scene that remains largely invisible. Suddenly war erupts, for which the tensions have been long developing, generally unnoticed. Economies can collapse in the same manner, catastrophically, when the economic system of value has been gutted over decades with exotic instruments of ravishing monetarism, which at first was ignored and then became increasingly tolerated till suddenly nothing works anymore. Then, at this point, the economies simply collapse. We are close to that worldwide. The same happens in astrophysics. Our complex solar system is collapsing in numerous ways, while the visible scene remains serene. Here too, the facade of normality is maintained by numerous types of regulating systems that keep up the facade. This hidden collapse continues till one day the illusions collapse. Before this point is reached, rarely more than a few fringe effects penetrate the facade with dire forebodings, which presently are far too few to take note of in astrophysics. Multi-level regulated astrophysical systems can only be understood in terms of principles, because it is in the nature of multi-level regulated systems to prevent potential events. This means that everything looks normal for the end process until all the reserves at the various levels are depleted. The first level regulating stage may be as large as the entire inner solar system. It holds large volumes of plasma in reserve to smooth out supply fluctuations. This regulating effect keeps the fluctuations averaged to long trends to prevent shock events. The regulating system may be able to smooth out fluctuations over 100-year periods, but it cannot affect the very long trends. The second level of the regulating system is the large plasma reservoir that is the Sun's corona, which is several times larger in volume than the Sun itself. It appears to be gravity-held. It likely prevents the solar system's 22-year resonance cycles from affecting the radiation intensity in the visible light band. The 22-year resonance cycle, when it is divided into two 11-year solar activity cycles, has been explained by David Lapointe as a cyclical change of magnetic dominance between the upper and lower primal fields that determines the effective alternating magnetic polarity of the Sun at the center between the two fields. This means that the magnetic field of the Sun is an induced phenomenon that originates with the primal fields. When the Ulysses spacecraft measured the reduction of the underlying magnetic field of the Sun by 30% over the 16 years of its mission, it gave us a measurement of the overall weakening of the primal fields during its time frame. This may be the only direct measurement we have been able to glean of the intensity of the system of the primal fields. The third level of the regulating system maintains the plasma pressure in the magnetic confinement dome of the reaction cells themselves, where the fusion reactions take place and the solar wind originates. The solar wind can therefore be seen as the final thermometer of the health of the system. When the wind diminishes to zero, big events will likely follow. The Little Ice Age between the 15th and the 18th century was still a fringe event. The next event on the diminishing slope of the solar system may be the terminal event that ushers in the Big Ice Age as the entire interlocked system stops functioning and the sun goes inactive. If the astrophysical principles become understood, preparations will likely be made before the potential big event happens. When the astrophysical principles become understood, most of the world's agriculture will be relocated onto the tropics, along the equator, onto networks of floating modules 1,000 kilometers wide, spanning the seas between the continents, connected with floating bridges, serviced from floating industries and floating cities, with free housing as an investment by society into itself. Then, when the potential event happens, as it may by its own timing, it becomes a non-event. On this platform of understood principles, humanity as a whole becomes uplifted by its own creative power. The humanist creative power already exists as a latent resource for a new age. Ironically, the physical construction that is required to save our existence appears to be the smallest part of the challenge that we need to master in the near term in order to have a future in the changing physical environment. The larger part of the challenge is spiritual in nature. Here the question comes to the surface: will we do what needs to be done? Will we become sufficiently human to support one another in universal love for the general welfare of all humanity, with a commitment to meet the common aims of mankind, including the aims for continuous development? Or will we remain stuck in the current smallness of thinking and encumbered relationships in universal isolation and privatization into poverty and worse, especially at the grassroots level where the living of humanity unfolds? In order to explore these types of questions, I have created a series of 12 novels, The Lodging for the Rose, where I explore the challenges involved towards a wider sense of loving that is reflecting the historic principle of universal love, as a counterpole against the long ages of inhibiting conventions, enabling an escape to greater freedom and creative power with the dynamics of the human heart and soul. We need this exploration in order to develop the dynamics in loving universally, which an advancing world requires. And this is not a small thing. It soon became apparent when the work was taken up that such a project couldn't be completed with a single novel. Consequently, the story was continued and expanded into a long series. I had thought at that time that the principle could be explored sufficiently with the addition of one more volume. But instead of enabling a closure, the additional volume opened numerous doors for moving forward. As the challenge widened, new principles brought greater freedoms into view, but also larger challenges with them, which no one had dared to tackle before, much less to win. The very notion of winning suddenly came to light as a complex of concepts that has countless dimensions, many remaining unclear, with the future still shrouded. And so the kaleidoscope keeps turning, this time in Russia, with new questions emerging. What are peace, grace, love, against the horrors of war, rape, and the pains of impotence? Is the earth really flat? Some say it is, some prove that it is, but for those whose bus got stuck in the mud, there is still hope. Hope is rooted in a Christmas present of science that sets up a higher stage. A miracle unfolds in India, a universal marriage in the land of the deepest caste division, deeper than sexual isolation and religious isolation, but flowing unseen with daring commitments without playing games. Why at all should small games continue to dominate the giant that the human being is? Just as the heart needs healing, and science does so likewise, the continent of Africa needs healing, and humanity with it. The truly endless horizons are the horizons of our own creating. In Caracas, a daring event is made to deny servitude and to master the future with ideas sown into the winds of time, so that the winds may change. Still the world grinds on. Are there lessons to be learned? Are there lessons to be drawn from the masters of spiritual science, who have in their season caused the winds of war to be still? The cup-bearer to the king is a dangerous pawn. He has many names. From his shadow he serves a cup of poison, seen hypothetically in Siberia, located in space, a killer of millions, while not a soul cares to raise a finger to stop it, save a nameless patriot. When people must flee the land of the free, China at last opens a home for healing, a portal for a justified hope, while the healing continues as it must. Hope is justified in all this, even on the Ice Age front. The more we discover the truth, the stronger we will become in mastering the power to meet the challenge, both in the spiritual and in the physical realm. We live in a universe of vast electric power, but before we can use it, we need to acknowledge that this anti-entropic power actually exists. Someday we will do this. When we stop to keep our mental horizon blocked with paradoxical illusions, especially in the sciences, we will find that we have truly infinite horizons before us, both in terms of the critical freshwater resources that we need and in energy resources more than we can yet imagine, which are all very real. You are invited here, as the video closes, to come and visit the great libraries created for many more explorations and numerous topics in the form of e-books, videos, and stories from the novels. Oh yes, great challenges do indeed lay before us, as we have the next ice age on the near horizon in possibly 30 years. And we do have the foreground threatened at the present with nuclear war, depopulation policies, choked science, and economic collapse, and so on. But we also have the greatest force on our side, with which to overcome these threats and to move forward towards meeting the Ice Age challenge. It is appropriate, therefore, in this context, that this video ends with the multifaceted celebration of our humanity that unfolds in the final 7 chapters of my series of the 12 novels, The Lodging for the Rose, that is focused on the principle of universal love. While the Ice Age challenge isn't even mentioned in these final chapters of the series, the grand human dimension is strongly focused on and is summarized in these chapters extensively. Hopefully, this type of focus will enable us to meet the greatest challenges that the present and the future may bring. Perhaps someday we will live up to who and what we already are as human beings, and discover us as the brightest diamonds in the sky. Of course, when we get to this recognition, and we will get there, the achievement will then likely be a non-event, as nothing else makes any sense then except to be what we already are.